My name is Daniel Park. I was 20 years old, alone in a dorm room at a college where I had not made a single real friend when I opened Omegle for the first time, and the very first person I connected with turned out to be a man in serious danger. What happened in the 30 seconds after that is the thing I have thought about every day for 7 years. I want to tell you about 3 separate nights on that platform. Not because they were all the same kind of disturbing, but because each one showed me something different about what lives on the other side of a random connection. Leave a comment if you have ever used Omegle. Keep listening because one of these does not have an ending I am comfortable with. The jar I want to explain what my life looked like in the fall of my sophomore year because the Omegle thing did not happen in a vacuum. It happened because I was lonely in the specific way that a person can be lonely while being surrounded by hundreds of other people who do not know they exist. I had moved into the dorms freshman year, thinking proximity would do the work that personality had not managed. It did not. The kids in my hall had found their people in the first 2 weeks, and the social architecture solidified around those early bonds in a way that left no obvious opening for someone who had missed the window. I went to class and came back to my room and studied and ate alone in the dining hall at off-peak hours to avoid the particular visibility of sitting alone during busy times. By sophomore year, I had stopped pretending I was going to figure it out organically, and I had started spending my evenings online. Gaming forums, video essays, anything that required enough attention to keep the quietness of the room from becoming the only thing I was aware of. Someone in a gaming forum mentioned Omegle. Random video chat, strangers from anywhere in the world. I had heard of it but never used it. One night in October, after finishing a study session, I turned off the lights in my room so the darkness behind me would not be visible on camera, and I opened the site. The first connection loaded. A man's feet. That was the first thing I saw. Bare feet on a desk aimed directly at the camera, hairy toes prominent in the frame. I sat there for a moment, genuinely unsure of what I was looking at or what the appropriate response was. I decided not to skip. I figured it would go somewhere either interesting or at least distracting. The man pulled back and revealed himself. He was middle-aged, balding, sitting in what looked like a small apartment with water-stained walls and a single overhead bulb that was not doing the space any favors. He seemed cheerful in a manic, performative way, the energy of someone who had decided something about this conversation already. He told me he had a special talent. He asked if I wanted to see. I said sure. He reached off camera and produced a large glass jar. Not a small jar, the kind used for storing bulk items in a commercial kitchen, wide-mouthed and thick-walled, set down on the desk between his legs with a solid thunk that I could hear through the speakers. He announced it like a carnival act. He said he was going to demonstrate contortionism. He told me to brace myself. I want to describe what I watched over the next 2 minutes as accurately as I can, because the accuracy of it is what made the next part so bad. He was a real contortionist, or had been one, or had practiced extensively because what he did was physically genuine. He got both feet into the jar first, then his legs folded at angles that should not have been available to an adult human body. Then with a series of movements I could not track quickly enough to fully understand, the rest of him followed. He compressed himself into that jar in a way that looked impossible, but was clearly real because I was watching it happen in real time with no cuts and no camera tricks. His face was pressed against the inside of the glass, distorted by it, cheeks flattened, forehead compressed against the curve of the wall. He looked up at me through the glass with an expression of genuine pride. Then he reached his one partially free arm out and put the lid on. He sealed himself inside. He looked at me through the glass for a moment, waiting for applause or reaction, the expression of a performer at the end of a trick. Then he tried to push the lid off. It did not move. I watched his expression change. The pride went first, then a kind of confused assessment, the look of someone running a quick calculation that is not producing the expected result. He tried again, pushing upward with the flat of his hand, and the lid shifted maybe a millimeter and then held. He was packed too tightly to get any leverage. His arms had almost no range of motion from inside the compressed position. Every attempt to push or twist or angle himself produced barely visible movement and cost him visible effort. His face went red. Then the panic arrived, not gradually. All at once, the way panic actually works a complete switch from one state to another. He started saying, "Get me out." His voice was muffled by the glass, but I could hear the word "please" clearly enough. He was asking me. He was looking at me through the glass and asking me to help him. I told him I needed to know where he was. I told him to give me his address and I would call the police. His eyes were wide and his breathing was visibly labored, his chest barely able to expand in the compressed space. He said he was in his apartment. He started trying to say more. He was forming the words. I hit the desk with my fist. My elbow came down on the edge of the keyboard, and my hand connected with something at the edge of the desk, and the skip button registered the impact. The chat disconnected. I sat in the dark of my room and stared at the screen that was now searching for a new connection, and I understood immediately what I had done and could not undo. I closed the laptop. I got out of my chair and walked to the window and stood there looking at the parking lot below for a long time. I had a partial description of a room, no address, no name, no Omegle account information, nothing that would let me tell the police anything more specific than a balding middle-aged man in an apartment with a water stain on the wall. I called the campus emergency line and told them what had happened. They transferred me to local police. I gave the description of everything I had seen. The officer on the line was patient and thorough. She took everything I gave her. There was nothing more they could do with what I had provided. I got drunk that night for the first time in my life, not intentionally. I found a bottle of whiskey that a previous tenant had left in the back of the closet shelf, and I drank enough of it to blur the image of his face against the glass. It did not fully work. I think about that man every time I look at my hands. The gap between my fist coming down and the chat disconnecting was maybe a quarter second, a single reflexive movement at the wrong moment. I have run through the alternate versions of that moment more times than I can count. I do not know what happened to him. I search online for news stories about a man found dead inside a glass container. I found nothing definitive. Either he survived, which is what I tell myself on good days, or he did not make enough noise for anyone to hear him. I went back to Omegle twice after that night. I know that seems like the wrong decision. I kept going back because I felt like stopping would mean that night was the last memory of the platform, and I was not willing to let it stay that way. The Catman. The second time I went on Omegle was about 3 weeks after the jar incident. I had not processed it fully, and I probably never fully have, but I had gotten to a place where I could sit at my desk without my hands shaking, and I figured that was sufficient. I made it through about 15 connections before I landed on something I could not easily categorize. The camera was on. The connection was live. But for the first few seconds, I could not identify what I was looking at. The figure in the frame was humanoid, but wrong in several ways simultaneously. The skin was very pale, the kind of pale that does not look healthy, and it was covered in something I could not immediately identify as makeup or texture or both. The eyes were heavily shadowed, dark, and sunken. The hair was patchy and irregular in a way that suggested it had been deliberately made to look that way. The face was oriented toward the camera, but not in a way that felt like normal eye contact. More like the way a surveillance camera faces in a direction without looking at anything specifically. I did not skip. I should have. But the same impulse that had kept me on the feet connection held me here. The impulse that says, wait and see if this is something interesting rather than something to avoid. The figure started making a sound, a low sustained vocalization that rose and fell in the pattern of a cat. Not enthusiastically or comically, flatly, like someone running through an exercise. I asked who they were. I asked why they were doing that. I kept my voice steady because something about the setup felt like it was designed to provoke a reaction, and I did not want to give it. The screen started glitching, not the gentle lag of a poor connection, but aggressive digital artifacting the image, breaking up into blocks and horizontal tiers. Through the distortion, I could see the figure moving. Fast off camera, a sudden repositioning that I lost track of in the interference. When the glitch resolved, the figure was no longer sitting upright. It was on all fours on the desk, face aimed at the camera from below, which meant the face was now upside down in my frame. The vocalization was still going. The eyes, which I could see more clearly now, were fixed on the camera with the particular unblinking focus of a person performing something they have rehearsed. I want to be clear about what I think was happening because I have thought about it a lot, and I do not believe in supernatural explanations. What I was looking at was a person who had put significant effort into a specific kind of presentation. The makeup, the positioning, the carefully timed glitch that I suspect was a recording overlaid on their feed rather than a real technical issue, the practiced physical movement into the all-fours position. This was a performance, a studied, rehearsed, deliberate performance designed to disturb the person on the other end of a random video connection. That does not make it less disturbing. In some ways, it makes it more disturbing. Because a glitch or a costume or a trick is one thing. The thing underneath it, the person who spent time planning this specifically to inflict it on strangers, is something else. The figure's head turned slowly to one side, then continued turning. Further than a normal range of motion, I kept watching, telling myself to reach for the mouse, not reaching for it. My computer crashed, completely and suddenly the screen going black, without a warning or a wind down. I sat in the dark room with the fan still spinning and the room's silence pressing in around me. I went to bed without restarting the computer. In the morning, I looked in the mirror before I got in the shower and found scratches on my forearms. 3 on the left, 2 on the right, the kind of shallow parallel marks that fingernails leave on skin. I had no memory of making them, but I know what stress does to sleep. And I know that I had been awake in bed for at least an hour after lying down, and that whatever my hands had been doing during that time while my brain was elsewhere was mine and not anyone else's doing. I went to the campus health center that afternoon. I told the counselor I had been having difficulty sleeping and that I had experienced some dissociative-seeming episodes during the night. She asked if I was under significant stress. I said yes. She gave me a referral to a sleep specialist and some general recommendations about limiting screens before bed. I did not tell her about the performance on my computer screen the night before. I did not think she would find it as relevant as I did. I have since seen similar setups described in online communities where people discuss Omegle. There are individuals who deliberately build elaborate, disturbing presentations to subject strangers to on random chat platforms. The combination of anonymity, the random assignment that means the target did not seek it out, and the inability to identify the performer creates a particular kind of powerlessness in the target that appears to be the point for some of these people. The performance I saw was one of the more committed versions I have read about. Whoever it was had put genuine time into it. I hope they eventually found something better to do with that time. I suspect they did not. Cry with me. The third night was the one I think about most often, not because of the ending, which was staged and stupid, but because of the 20 minutes before the ending. This was in January of my junior year. A winter storm had kept the campus effectively sealed for 3 days. I was in my room with my roommate who had gone to bed around midnight, and I was at my desk at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep because the silence of a snowstorm is a specific kind of silence that I find more oppressive than ordinary quiet. I opened Omegle. I had not used it since the Catman night. I did not have a good reason for choosing that night to try again. I just did. The first 20 or so connections were what Omegle usually was. Men I skipped. Men who skipped me. A few people who seemed fine but disconnected after a few seconds for no particular reason. The low-grade demoralizing experience of being rejected by strangers who had no information about me beyond my face. Then a girl appeared on my screen. She looked to be around my age. Blonde, sitting in what appeared to be a bedroom with no light source except the glow of her own laptop, the same setup I was using. She was hunched forward with her arms on the desk on either side of the keyboard, and her expression was the specific expression of someone who has been crying recently. Not crying now, but recently. The red-edged eyes and the slightly collapsed quality of the face around the nose and mouth. I waved, just a small wave. The kind you do when the alternative is saying nothing and you cannot think of words yet. She waved back. She did not say anything. I typed in the chat box. I said, "Hi, I was Justin," what was her name? When I looked up from the keyboard, she was noticeably closer to the camera than she had been. Her eyes were open wider than they had been. Not in an alarming way initially, in the way that a person looks when something has caught their full attention. She started typing. I could hear it through the microphone loud and fast, the kind of typing that does not look at the keyboard and does not slow down. She typed for a long time without stopping. I watched the indicator that showed the other person was typing, and it stayed on for what felt like 2 full minutes. Then she sent it all at once. The message was a single request repeated over and over down the length of the chat window. "Can you please cry with me?" That was all. 30 or 40 iterations of the same sentence filling the entire message pane. I said yes. I did not know what else to say. It seemed like the response the situation called for, and I did not want to skip someone who was clearly in some kind of distress. She began to cry immediately after she read my response. Real tears, real sound, the kind of crying that is not performed for effect, but is the body's actual involuntary response to something internal. I sat there watching this girl I did not know cry on my screen in the middle of the night during a snowstorm, and I tried to cry with her the way she had asked. I could not do it. I could not manufacture actual tears. I made the sounds of crying quieter than they probably needed to be because my roommate was 3 feet away asleep, and I felt the full absurdity and genuine sadness of the moment at the same time. The absurdity because I was quietly fake sobbing at 2 in the morning for a stranger I had known for less than 5 minutes. The genuine sadness because she was clearly not faking. Whatever she had asked this from me for the grief behind the request was real. This went on for a while. She would get closer to the camera and then pull back. She kept her mouth closed the entire time, even when she needed to breathe through the crying, pressing her lips together and breathing hard through her nose. I noticed it and thought it was a private thing, a habit some people have a way of containing the crying somewhat. After about 15 minutes, she seemed to settle. The crying slowed. I typed and asked if she was okay. I asked if she wanted to talk about what was happening. She stopped crying completely. The shift was fast, the way a switch works, rather than the way a mood naturally winds down. She smiled, small but present. She typed, "Do you want to know why I kept my mouth closed the whole time?" I typed yes. She looked at the camera for a moment. We looked at each other across 2 dorm rooms in a snowstorm. Then her smile got a little bigger, the kind of smile that happens when a person is about to do something they have prepared. She opened her mouth. Whatever she had arranged in there, fake insects, or a trick device, or a theatrical prop, it was convincing enough in the dark and from the distance of a laptop camera to make me flinch hard enough to knock my knee into the underside of the desk. I jammed the power button and held it until the screen went dark. I sat there in the dark for a few seconds. My roommate turned over in his sleep and made a small sound. I went to the window and looked at the snow. I thought about the 15 minutes before the ending, the crying that was real, the closed mouth and the careful breathing, The message typed over and over that I had said yes to without knowing what I was agreeing to. I thought about the planning involved. She had set it up carefully. The genuine crying or something that looked and sounded exactly like it held long enough to get another person invested in her distress. The sustained time before the punchline. The closed mouth maintained through real seeming tears for the whole duration. It was a long way to go for what amounted to a jump scare. I thought about that a lot over the following days. The amount of patience required, the willingness to perform genuine seeming grief for 20 minutes to land a single moment of shock. I wondered what she got from it, whether it was the reaction itself, the visible flinch, the disconnection, whether it was the preceding 20 minutes the other person sitting there trying to cry with her earnest and compliant, whether it was both in sequence. I have not been back to Omegle since that night. What stays? I want to close these three stories by being honest about what I have taken from them. The man in the jar is the one that actually matters in terms of consequence. Whatever the cat man was and whatever the crying girl was, they were performances by people choosing to subject strangers to something disturbing, unpleasant, unsettling, possibly harmful to someone with the wrong kind of vulnerability. But performances. The man in the jar was something else. He was a real person in a genuinely dangerous situation, and the only reason he had any contact with another human being in that moment was that we had both opened a website designed to connect strangers randomly. He did not plan a performance. He planned a trick, and the trick went wrong, and I was the only person who saw it happen. I hit the desk by accident, and the chat closed, and I lost him. I think about what would have happened if I had gotten his address, if he had been able to say it clearly before the disconnect, if I had stayed still. The 30 seconds before I hit the desk were the 30 seconds that mattered, and I spent them asking him to tell me where he was, rather than sitting very still with my hands in my lap. I know that is not a useful thing to have realized after the fact. I know that. But I have replayed it often enough that the version where I stay still, and he says the address has become nearly as vivid as the real version. If you ever encounter something on a platform like Omegle, where someone appears to be in danger, the first thing you should do is start a screen recording before anything else. Before you say anything, before you try to help, start recording. It takes 3 seconds and it gives you something recoverable if the connection breaks. The second thing is to tell the person to speak their location out loud, not type it. Typing takes longer and requires focused motor control that someone in distress may not have. Speaking is faster. Say your city, say your street, say your building. Get the words in the air where the microphone can catch them. The third thing is to keep your hands still. That is the one I think about most. Keep your hands still. Whatever happens in the next few seconds, do not hit the desk. The man in the jar may have been rescued by someone else, by a neighbor who heard something, by a friend who stopped by a version of the situation I did not see from my side of the screen. I want that to be true. I need it to be true in some basic way that I cannot fully explain. But I do not know, and that not knowing has been sitting in the corner of every room I have been in for the last 7 years, quiet and patient and not going anywhere. If you are reading this and you know anything about an incident, like what I described, a man middle-aged, balding, small apartment somewhere in the world in the fall of 2016 or thereabouts, who was found somehow anywhere, I want to know. I have wanted to know since the moment my hand hit that desk. The crying girl and the cat man both chose what they were doing. They made decisions and executed them, and they are out there somewhere having made other decisions since. I have no particular feeling about either of them beyond the mild discomfort of knowing that people with that kind of patience exist and occasionally land in your connection queue. The man in the jar did not choose. He was just a person who tried to show a stranger something impressive and had it go wrong in the worst possible way. And the only person watching when it happened was a 20-year-old kid alone in a dorm room who hit the desk at the wrong moment. I graduated. I made some friends eventually. I work in IT security now, which turned out to be a natural fit for someone who spent a lot of time thinking about what happens in the spaces between people and screens. I still keep my hands flat on the desk when I'm in a video call. Old habit,